Shana Tov, everybody. Hope everybody had a meaningful yontif, had a enjoyable yontif. It is a yontif. Rosh Hashanah, the Mishnah says yontif shel Rosh Hashanah. It's a question, exactly the mood on Rosh Hashanah. That's not our topic for tonight. But Rosh Hashanah is when all is said and done. You have to eat. That's how we rule, and you have to drink wine. And yeah, but we're confident. I don't know why, but we're confident that the world will become better next year than it is this year. I sure hope so. Anyways, on a global level. Okay, let's hope. Let's hope. Okay, Parshat Vayelech. So actually, this is usually Nitzavim Vayelech are read together. The rule is that um, if there's a Shabbos between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, so then you split Nitzavim Vayelech. Nitzavim is always lamed the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says Kitavo should be laying the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, or that Ezra who made a lot of the laws, the way we read the Torah, said that the klalot, the curses in Dvarim, Parsha Kitavo, should be read before Rosh Hashanah, sort of as the year end, the curses should end, or really a reminder to the Jewish people about you better do tshuva. But Tosva points out we don't want to do that. We don't want to lay in Kitavo right before Rosh Hashanah. It's sort of not nice. It's like we always want to end up Torah on a nice note, so to speak. So we make Kitavo a week earlier. So Nitzavim is always done the week before, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So we got Hazinu, we got to squeeze in. So if we have, depends if we have 2 or 3 Shabbatot. So if you've got this extra Shabbos, like we do this year between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, so we can split Nitzavim Vayelech. As I said, I think in my podcast that I don't know when it's going to go out, when the Vayelech, or maybe last week, I don't remember. Our sages had Rahmanas on us. We spend so much time in shul this time of year, so they made all the parshat at the end of the year very, very short. Nitzavim is 40 psukim, Vayelech's 30 psukim, Hazinu is 52 psukim. Okay, what I want to do, I want to really talk about 2 things. We'll do a little introduction to the parsha. I want to talk a little bit about Hakel, the relationship between the last 2 mitzvot, what is considered to be the last 2 mitzvot of the Torah, the mitzvah of Hakel, to gather everybody all together once in 7 years, and the mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah, that every person. But before we get there, a few points. I was thinking, I don't know if somebody has insight. It's very interesting. The parsha is called Vayelech. By the way, all these ending parshas of the year, it's all very interesting. Kiteitzei, Kitavo, you go out, you come in. Nitzavim, you stand still. Vayelech, you move forward. That's actually, when we read the parsha, the names contradict each other. Nitzav means to stand, and Vayelech means to move. That's the challenge of the Jew. That's the challenge of the Jew in the modern period. When do we stand still? When do we insist on doing things as we always do? And when do we move around? When do we change things? I mean, if you want to put it on a homiletical sense. But I think that is very true. There's Nitzavim Vayelech, and then there's Hazinu. You gotta pay attention. But it's interesting, like, if you look at all the parshas, so I'm just going to read the first words of like 8 or 9 parshas, and you'll know right away what they mean. So there's Eila Toldot Noach. There's Eila Toldot Yitzchak. There's Vayetze Yaakov, Vayeshev Yaakov, Vayigash Elav Yehuda, Vayichi Yaakov, Vayishma Yitro, Vayikach Korach, Vayar Balak, Vayelech Moshe. So you notice the pattern here? Anybody figure out what the pattern is?
It's a
What?
verb.
I'm sorry?
A verb.
I'm sorry. No, in other words, what's
Notable characters.
yeah, no. So Eila Toldot Noach, the parsha is called Noach. Eila Toldot Yitzchak, the parsha is called Toldot. We could have called Noach Toldot and Yitzchak. We didn't do that. Then we have Vayetze Yaakov, so we could call it Yaakov. We call it Vayetze. Then we have Vayeshev Yaakov. Again, we don't call it Yaakov. We call it Vayeshev. Vayigash Yehuda. We could call it Yehuda. Then Vayichi Yaakov. Again, we could. So 3 times we call Yaakov. We never call him that. And then Vayishma Yitro. So why don't we call it Vayishma? Why do we call it Yitro?
Rabbi Jay, movement.
No, I understand. The question is why is it called Parshat Yitro? Maybe this is whatever. I don't know. Vayikach Korach. Why is it called Korach and not Vayikach?
Because it talks about, I guess, to differentiate all the different parshas about all the different.
No, but my question is, how come sometimes you use the verb and sometimes use the name of the person. Vayar Balak. It could have been Vayar. Vayelech. It could be Moshe. We could name a parsha after Moshe. So I think what the first thing that struck me right away is that all the non-Jews get the parsha names. So you get Noach, Yitro, Balak, or the bad guys, Korach, all the good people, Yaakov, Moshe, Yitzchak. They don't get parsha named after them. Maybe some notion of being humble. I don't know. This is like a Josh. It's interesting. That's what we do now. Pinchas. So we have two exceptions to this rule. It's clear. It's either non-Jews. The Parshiot are Noach, Yitro, Balak are non-Jewish, and we understand why Korach, even though he's Jewish, he acted like a non-Jew. Yeah, I mean, he was like not in the Jewish Parsha. And then all the other ones.
Rabbi, who decided by the name?
I don't know who decided.
That's
Klal Yisrael decided.
no.
That's what we do.
No,
That's what
because
everybody does.
the division of parashot was not done by us.
Oh, it doesn't. Yeah, yes, it was. Absolutely was done by us. What wasn't done by us is the division into prakim. Yeah, we decided to make a 1-year cycle. There used to be a 3-year cycle. I don't care. I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's just a cute introduction. I'm saying Klal Yisrael has determined what the names are. How it happened, it doesn't matter. So my question is, why did Klal Yisrael do this? Klal Yisrael is an important institution. You come to a lot of minhagim we do. A lot of minhagim. The rabbis can yell back and forth and do whatever they want, stand on their head. Klal Yisrael decides what to do. Today, less so. That's part of Chaim Soloveitchik's article. And so what about? So there are two exceptions: Pinchas and Chayei Sarah. So Pinchas, I thought, if anybody is going, we'll save it for the end. Pinchas, I think the Torah is telling us that Pinchas, he's a good guy, and God gave him a blessing, a peace. But Pinchas is not a role model. You're not allowed to have, we're not allowed to be extremist. Pinchas was an exception, and we know that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't do it, and the rabbis say, had Pinchas asked, could he do what he does? He would have been told no. It's just because he was so hyped up in the moment and so taken aback by what's going on. So he excused what he did, but it's not really right. What he did wasn't really correct. And that's why God had to give him a covenant of peace. And they say a cute word. I don't know. This already is a little bit too much. Pinchas is never double parsha. You got, Chuka Palak, then you have Pinchas alone, then Matat Masei. Pinchas only alone. You have one extremist you can live with. You got too many extremists, you're in big trouble. And then Chayei Sarah. So why do we name Chayei Sarah? So Taka, I think that's why we name it Chayei Sarah. We don't call it Sarah. We don't call it Yishma Yitro. We don't call it Vayar Balak. We call it one name, Balak. Right? We do call it Achremot. We don't call it Nadav and Avihu. We call it Achremot. They are tzaddikim. They died, right? Could have also called that Nadav and Avihu. Achremot, Nadav, Avihu. That's going to be the laning on Yom Kippur. So I think that's why we threw in the name Chayei Sarah to teach us that. No. Okay, whatever that means. Okay, so let's discuss our 30 psukim in Vayelech. So the Torah tells us that Moshe is 120 years old, and he's got all his faculties in place. So right away, what's the first thing? When you hear the name 100, when's the first time the number 120 is mentioned in the Torah?
After the flood, when God decided to limit the length of days, men's days.
Before the flood, right? Before the flood, right? So it's right before the flood. So we'll take a quick look. So the Torah here says, I just find it interesting. This is interesting. Where is it? Not here. A man was being lots of people. The population was exploding. And and then the children of God, whatever that means, that's a whole different shiur. They basically, it sounds like they raped them. That's what it sounds like. They saw the woman that they were good looking, whatever. And they took them, or they took them as wives, whatever. Whatever they felt like, whoever they chose. The woman had no say in the matter. And God didn't like that. It's the next verse. Maybe he didn't like other things too, but this is where the verse comes. Vayomer Shem lo adum ruchi badam lo lam b'shagam hu basar. Remember, up to now, everybody's living 900 years. Everybody's living these very, very long lives. And God said, you're only going to live to be 120. Now, Moshe is the first person in the Torah to live to be 120. It took a long time. Now, mind you, it's only 16 generations. No, but whatever it is, it took a long time. Now, this I also didn't realize. There's only one other person. There are probably people who died younger, but there's only one other person who we know died younger than Moshe Rabbeinu, and who's that?
Yosef.
Yosef at 110. Everybody else in the Aaron's 123. That we're told. I mean, we're not told so many after Bereshit. We're not told the lifespan of so many people. Avram's 180, 175. Yitzchak is 180. Yaakov is 147. Yishmael is 137. Amram is 137. Right, I spoke about that. Right. Yishmael, Amram, and Kahat, I think, are all 137, and then Levi's 133. In the genealogies in chapter 6, everybody's living, long. Only Moshe lives to be 120. Yosef, why did Yosef die at 110? The rabbis commented he was the first brother to die. He was the 11th brother, but he was the first one who died. And so the rabbis say because he was a ruler, he ruled over them. He was a little bit. He didn't treat his brothers so nicely. I'm the king. I'm the royalty. You'll come and bow down to me. And that's how the Medrash interprets it. He was banished. He was punished for the way he treated his brothers. He died at 110. Could say, of course, leaders. I don't know if this is statistically true, but I assume most leaders die younger. The pressure.
Rabbi K,
I'm sorry.
how old was Sarah when she died?
How old was Sarah? 127. Sarah's 127. Right. Sarah, okay. So, but I don't know if leaders die earlier because of the pressure, but be that as it may, Moshe Rabbeinu is the first person to die at 120, what God had predicted. Now, the rabbis have an additional, or maybe a different interpretation of that verse, that man's lifespan will be 120 years. So the rabbis interpret that to mean in 120 years, I'm going to bring the flood. In other words, man has 120 years to live, meaning I have 120 years to do tshuva, or I'm going to wipe them out. And that's the other way. But it's, from reading the verse, you can't tell which is true. I think both are true. I mean, to me, I read it initially as like what I explained, that Moshe Rabbeinu, the lifespan of man is too corrupt. We can't have him living for 900 years. Man's only going to live to be 120. But you can also interpret, and that's how the rabbis do that. I think Rashi brings the second interpretation that after 120 years, the flood will come. Now, of course, that gets to a whole other shir. The link is between Noach and Moshe. Of course, the 40 days between Noach and Moshe, and they're both saved through the going in a boat. There are a lot of parallels between Moshe and Noach. But that's just kind of an interesting them. Moshe lived to be 120. Of course, that becomes in Jewish history. We wish people to live 120. And of course, we really wish they should have all their faculties. Now, this is the introduction to the Parsha, really. Or this is the beginning of the Parsha. What does Moshe do? He's 120, and he writes a Sefer Torah. And he gives it, and he tells the people, I'm going to die, soon. This all of Sefer Dvarim is his farewell speech, and Yoshua is going to be your leader, and you better listen to Yoshua and be strong. He'll take you in. God will be there for us. Don't worry, because everybody's nervous. Listen, when Moshe went up to Mount Sinai, he stayed an extra few hours. They built a golden calf. The Jewish people, it's another generation. They haven't proven they're so great either. They've also complained it's going to be very difficult. Moshe Rabbeinu, who's leading the way, is this Yoshua, guy, some military expert who led us in the Battle of Amalek, which is perhaps one of the things he was chosen for. Of course, you're going to conquer the land, so you want a military leader to help you conquer the land. Moshe had no military experience, but Yoshua is the one who fought against Amalek. So we're transitioning the leadership from Moshe to Yoshua, and I find it very interesting that then right away the Torah gives the mitzvah of Hakel. So the mitzvah of Hakel, why don't we take a quick look at the Persian side so we can just see it. Otioch machimot. So what does the Torah tell her here? Okay, I'm 120. Okay, so actually, before we do that, let me do something else. I'm 120 today. The idea that it seems to be the last day of his life, right? Assuming Moshe was born and died on the 7th of Adar. I don't know for sure. It's not mandatory to interpret it that way, but that's how the rabbis understood it. That he's 120 days today. He turns 120th birthday. Lo chalot latzeit v'lavo. I can't do this anymore. I can't go in, come out. Vashem amar lai, and God told me I can't even stay. I can't be your leader. Lo chalot latzeit v'lavo, and I can't even go in as a citizen, not as a leadership. They'll take me in a wheelchair. I can't do that. I can't pass. Now, it's also interesting. Where do you have the expression latzeit v'lavo? Where else does that expression come up?
That's for leading the army. That's what when you lead the army, you go out, you take them out and you bring them back.
Right. And where was it said? Who used this
In
expression?
Parshat Pinchas.
Yeah, who used the expression? This is the exact
Moshe.
expression Moshe used when they wanted to appoint Yoshua. It's very beautiful how the Torah is coming back to him, right? So here you have, right, Vaydaber Moshe, this is right after Benot Tzlofchad, right after the census, Pinchas Benot Tzlofchad, they want a Persian land. Vaydaber Moshe El Shem Lemor. This is the only time in the Torah it tells us that Moshe spoke to God. And what I've explained many times, what does the word Lemor mean? It doesn't mean saying. I know this is how they translate here, but that's not, I know, incorrect. Maybe is a harsh word. That's not the real meaning of lamor. I don't need the word lamor. But if it says Vayadaber Moshe, so Moshe said something, and Moshe spoke to God saying, well, if he spoke, obviously he said something. So the word lamor in biblical Hebrew never means to say over. It means to asking for a response. Vayadaber Moshe Hashem. In other words, Moshe Vayadaber Hashem Moshe lamor. God spoke to Moshe, not that, and this is what he told him. This is what he told him to tell the Jewish people. In other words, God spoke to Moshe so that Moshe would tell the Jewish people. And that's why Chazal and the Aseret HaDibrot, right before the Aseret HaDibrot, it's by the barrel him called Verimil Lemor. Who's God? What do you mean? God spoke to the Ten Commandments saying, well, what do you mean? Saying, I understand, but if it means to respond, so that's why Chazal say that the Jewish people answered each one of the Aseret HaDibrot. Amar hein, hein, v'alav, lav. On yes, they said yes, on no, they said no. There's a whole other fascinating stuff there. So it means that Moshe expects a response from God. Okay. You've got Hashem Elokei Ruchod L'chol Basar. We need a leader, and then now we're going to have the leader. Pinchas is asking for a leader. Now it's going to happen. Vayelech Asher Yetzei Lahem Vayevol Livim. It's the same language. Moshe Rabbeinu is referring to the same language that he said before. Yetzei and who will come and go. And as Rashi says, you're right. As Ruth pointed out before. Just let me do the commentaries here. It's why does nothing come up here? I don't know why. Resources. So Rashi says, Mefarshim, Rashi. They all say this, what Rashi says. Basically, there'll be a military leader. Not like the other nation. The generals sit in their home and they send other people to battle. You've got to go. Okay, Moshe, I fought Sichon and Og. You got to be the first one to go. So that's very interesting. That's the language that Moshe Rabbeinu uses over here. Let's say Philavot, the language meaning it does have a military connotation. I can't lead you anymore. Fine. So then he goes on and he says, don't worry, God will take you in. And then the Torah tells us a mitzvah of Hakel. You should all gather together. You're going to die. Call Yoshua and come to the Yoam Moed and stand there. And then God tells the Jewish people, okay, I skipped it here. Where's the Hakel? Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. Hakel atam anashim anashim bataf. You have to gather the men, the women, and the children, Laman Yishmu v'Laman Yilmedu, in order that they should learn, in order they should listen, in order they should learn, teach the Torah. And when do we do this? Every 7th year, b'moed shnat hashmita and chag hasukot. So the Torah tells us that every 7 years, everybody has to come together, men, women, and children. Not only men, women, and children. Taf means babies. And the Gemara says, why did the babies come? To bring reward to their parents. Unless you believe in the Beethoven music, if you play the little kids, you bring them, they get in the vibes. And that probably is true too. But the Gemara says to bring reward to the parents. Now, why do we do this mitzvah? On what's the connection between Sukkot and Shemitah and, B'moed Shnat HaShemitah? What's the connection between Hakel, Shemitah, and Sukkot? What do they all have in common? And this is exactly ties in to what Yoshua is doing. What's the most important thing a new leader has
Culture
to
in Eretz Israel.
I'm sorry?
Agriculture in Eretz Israel.
Okay, agriculture in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, Sukkot, the four meaning celebrates agriculture, right? Shemitah. Okay, very good, fine. God is a master of agriculture.
And taking care of the stranger, of the
Taking care of
orphans.
the stranger, Shemitah, right? Letting the poor come into your field,
But
canceling
Sukkot
out
is
debts.
also.
Sukkot
But,
also
but
absolutely
Sukkot is also
welcoming
that's a part.
everybody there. Right, good. Fine, excellent, very good. Now, what's the first thing a leader has to do? What do you say? What's the most important thing for a leader to do, especially a new leader? And we have new leaders, no?
I think a new leader needs to show by example. And I also think the new leader needs to get to know his people.
He needs to get good
So
people.
he
Very good. So how does he get to know his people? Right. The role of the leader. What does a good leader do when they get elected? They say, I'm the president or prime minister or whatever for the whole country, not just the people who elected me, because this where we have to come together as a country. We had a divisive campaign, and people are calling each other's names and all kinds of things, and we're going to heal the thing. The most important thing for a successful leader is to bring the people together, not to cause divisions. So
and Moshe did
wait.
for
If you can
the
hold
people.
on a second, if you don't mind, thank you. So that's the role of leader. So the Torah, right after we transfer leadership to Yeshua, has the mitzvah of Hakel, to bring the people all together, which is exactly what Sukkot is all about. Sukkot is called as Rach Yisrael Garba Sukkot. Sukkot is known as a holiday of Jewish unity. The four meaning represents the four different types of Jews. Obviously, Shemitah is that same idea. Everybody's welcome to come to the field. We're all like one big thing. The notion of Hakel is gathering all the people, but that's the most important thing that a leader has to do, is he has to bring the people all together, especially a new leader, especially Moshe's been leading for 40 years. And I assume Yeshua is relatively unknown to the people. I mean, yes, he had some miracle battle with Amalek. He was one of the spies, but he hangs around with Moshe a lot. I don't know how well knowing Yeshua is. So I don't think it's coincidental. This is there, besides the mitzvah of the Torah, there's like a political message here. The Torah is telling us what a leader has to do. And it reminded me, I was saying, Doron Perez, Rav Doron Perez, of course, unfortunately, he is one of his son is one of the 48 not alive hostages in Gaza. The head of World Mizrahi. So he spoke last year at a program we did, and he made I thought it was such a beautiful comment. He explained, I don't know if anybody remembers when he was there, about a year and a half ago. He said before they knew his son wasn't alive, when the son was missing. So he said, we're described as an Amkshe Oref, a stiff-necked people. What does it mean to be an Amkshe Oref? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? When the Torah uses the expression, is it positive or negative?
Negative. That's
Negative.
why we have
Both.
to repent for it.
Both. It
The
has
Torah
both.
uses it in a negative connotation.
But
Right.
it has both.
Sometimes. But what
No,
he's saying,
all
what
the
does it mean
time.
to be a Kshay Oref? What do the words mean? Sorry?
That's stubborn.
So he says it means you have a stiff neck.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean to have a stiff neck? It means you can't go like this, and you can't go like this. You can only
Rigid.
you have tunnel
You
vision.
can't compromise.
A person who has a Kshay Oref has tunnel vision. He
Can't
only sees
compromise.
Only to
what's in
look
front of
ahead.
him. Yeah. He can't see any other perspective. He can't see to the
Say
right.
it in
can't see to the
Vidui,
left, can't
Kishinu
see that.
Oref.
I'm sorry?
We say that in Vidui, Kishinu Oref.
Right, Kishin Orf. We have a stiff neck. But what does it mean? Most people, and I also thought before I heard this, stubborn, we're stiff neck. That's what but he said, take it literally. When you have a stiff neck, it means you can't see anything else. You can only see, your tunnel vision. I think it's such a beautiful thing. And if you know Rabbi Peres, I think he's a wonderful leader. I don't know how many people know who he is. And he was rabbi in South Africa he grew up in South Africa, and a lot of the South Africans are very talented. There's a certain like culture that Jewish people have in South Africa. I mean, I married into a South African family. I'm not saying it just because of that, but it really is true. And he was in Israel. He made Aliyah at 18, and they came. I don't know. After 10 years, they came. People from his community came, said, we need you as our rabbi in our shul. You got to come back to South Africa. So he agreed to go back for 2 years. I'll go back, serve my community for 2 years. And it took him 15 years to get back to Israel. And he came back to Israel, and he brought life to Mizrachim. Mizrachim was a dead organization, and he's revived the organization. It was very tragic. But he was in Toronto recently, and he spoke in their shul, and one of the shuls he spoke at, and he said that October 7th could have been a lot worse. I mean, in a lot of ways, but even it's an amazing thing to what he spoke. And he had another son who was in the army who was shot also on October 7th, wounded in the leg, but thank God survived. And got married a week later. I don't know if people remember that. His other son got married a week later, and Nunu, he said it could have been a lot worse. He says whatever. So I think that's very important. Hakel Am is to be the opposite of an Am Kshei Oref. You gather the people all together. This is Moshe's parting message. This is Moshe's parting message to the Jewish people. Okay, that's A. Then we have an additional mitzvah. That's what is considered by the people who count mitzvot, this 612th mitzvah of the Torah. The 613th mitzvah of the Torah, which is, again, how Chazal flipped exactly what the Torah means. They basically, Chazal say you'll see what I mean. They say the opposite of what it says in the Torah. God tells Moshe, you're going to die soon. Called Yeshua, and he says, I want you to know what's going to happen when you die. This is like unbelievable. The Jewish people who you've nurtured for 40 years are going to worship idols. And they're going to leave me. Moshe, that's it. The Jewish people, they're finished once you die. I don't know if I'm Moshe, what a depressing message. Everything Moshe prepared the Jewish people for 40 years is all going to be for naught. Because as soon as you die, God tells Moshe, the Jewish people are going to get up and they're going to go and seek other gods. And I'm going to be really mad at the Jewish people. And I'm going to hide my face. There's notion of Hester Panim. This is where it comes from. And terrible things are going to happen to the Jewish people. Ra'ot, Rabot, Sarot. And they're because, they abandoned God. So you know what you should do? How are you going to try to prevent them from abandoning God? I want you to give the Jewish people a warning. And I want you to give them, I want you to write them as a sort of this song for them that's going to warn them, and teach them, put it in their mouth, sima b'fiyam, let them have it. Leman so this song should be witness. Yeah, when they get exiled and are suffering and they complain to me, here's the witness. I warned you. I told you. Here's the song. I put it right in your mouth. What's the song? So the song, of course, is right here. Hazinu, you look how it's written. Hazinu Hashemayim Badabeira. The heavens and the earth, they listen to God, right? But the Jewish people, Hatsur Tamim Palo, God is God doesn't tolerate any Kol Dracha Mishpat. God does what's justice. He's a tzaddik, yashar. He doesn't tolerate Bani Mumam Dori Keshu Pitel Tol. He doesn't like this generation crooked and twisted. And Am Naval Velo Chacham. No, it's not going to work. So that's, they forgot the lessons of history, Zechor Yemot Olam. They forgot what happened to their parents, right? So, et cetera, et cetera. That's the song that Moshe has to write in order to prevent or to warn the Jewish people that when they get punished and exiled, it's their fault for leaving. It's really it's a kind of really depressing message for I think for last thing that
generation that's going to go in.
Yeah. This is generation going into the land. Yeah. This generation going into the land. Now, what do our rabbis do with this verse? So our rabbis turn this verse on its head. It's not contradictory. It's just interesting. But as I think many people might know, the rabbis said that this is a mitzvah. It sounds like in the Torah, this is Moshe Rabbeinu giving it, like a lot of the mitzvot in the desert. They didn't apply for all time. There's a specific mitzvah to warn the Jewish people here. So the rabbis say, no, every Jew has to write this song, and this song is the Sefer Torah. Every Jew has to write a Torah, and they have to keep the Torah. Everybody has to have their own Torah, has to have their own Sefer Torah. That's how the rabbis interpret Shira Hazot, and that's the 613th mitzvah of the Torah, to write our own Sefer Torah, and that's why so many people dedicate a Sefer Torah, and they spend $50,000, and we'll explain before the end of this year why I personally don't like that idea at all. I think that you will see in halakha, but it's very dangerous to talk these. I don't want to, God forbid, get anybody upset. But we'll see. The mitzvah is not the way Chazal originally interpreted mitzvah. What I want to do. So I want to explain how two brothers-in-law explain this mitzvah, and I want to show you inside. So I think how many people are aware of the commentary of the Netziv on this idea? How many people know besides Ruth? Okay, so we'll go over that. But I'm going to start the Netziv Naftali Tzvihu to Berlin, 1816 to 1893, the Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin. So his brother-in-law is the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan is Rav Yechiel Michal Epstein. And Yechiel Michal Epstein was born in 1829 to 1908. He's like 13 years his senior. I'll tell you in a second why that's kind of interesting. And the Aruch HaShulchan married the Netziv's sister. They learned together in Volozhin. The Aruch HaShulchan's sister, Epstein, Mrs. Epstein, I don't know whatever her first, I don't know what her first name is. I know the Netziv's second wife was Bat Yarena, but I don't know what her first was. The first name was. Anyways, and so both the Aruch HaShulchan, of course, he wrote sort of an updated Shulchan Aruch. Basically, that's why he's called the Aruch HaShulchan. He was the rabbi in the Vordik. He was a Muslim. The Vordik was like a Musar city, focusing on ethical things. He was a community rabbi. He served as a rabbi, unlike the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah was never a Rav. The Mishnah Berurah was a Rosh Yeshiva, and that's why all the Gedolim of the past generation, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, they all said that people should follow the Aruch HaShulchan, not the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is too strict. It's not for Bnei Yeshiva, not for regular people. It's for Bnei Yeshiva. When a rabbi rules differently than a Rosh Yeshiva, a rabbi is dealing with real people. People work at the Rosh Yeshiva is dealing with the Krima, see, in the ivory tower of the yeshiva, like a university professor. So, no. But anyway, so the Aruch HaShulchan very important. So the Aruch HaShulchan, that these two brother-in-laws each have a commentary on why the Torah refers to itself as how do the rabbis get this idea that the word shirah, song, means the entire Torah? Well, where are they coming off from that from? The Torah tells us, write this, it's Hazinu, it's right there, write it, warn the Jewish people. Where do they get this idea that this means that they have to write a Sefer Torah? Now, by the way, it's an interesting aside. The Netziv and the Aruch HaShulchan were brothers-in-law. Now, I'm sure Ruth knows, right, that eventually, you're right, you know this, eventually, I don't recommend this. Eventually, the Netziv became the son-in-law of the Aruch HaShulchan. So his 13-year junior brother-in-law became his father-in-law. The Netziv's wife died, and he was in his late 60s, early 70s, and his niece, the Aruch HaShulchan's daughter, wanted to marry her uncle, and they thought she was crazy. He was 36 years older than she was, and whatever. I don't know the whole story. They got married. Bat Yarena, that's the one I think. They got married, and they had a son, and that son's name was Meir, and you all know about him. Because that's Meir Bar Ilan. Meir Berlin was a very prominent Zionist, very involved in the Mizrahi movement that the Ron Peres now heads. And the one who, with Rav Zevin, came up with the idea of Encyclopedia Talmudit. That was their brainchild, the red volumes putting the entire Talmud. And of course, when he died in 1940s or so, he worked when Bar Ilan University was founded. So they named Bar Ilan University from the Netziv's son, Rav Meir Bar Ilan. He had an older brother, 55 years older than he was, when the Netziv got married at 16, his first wife. So that's pretty wild. And then he had a son, Chaim. So they live on Coney Island Avenue in New York. That's Chaim Berlin, Yeshiva Chaim Berlin. So Yeshiva Chaim Berlin, isn't that beautiful? See the idea that one brother is Bar Ilan University and one brother is Yeshiva Chaim Berlin. And you should know, I'm just thinking this, the Netziv was a big unifier, and he has a tshuva. It's really, whatever. I'm not going to spend the whole year just telling you about everything about him, although I could. He has a tshuva about how terrible it is to have separate communities. The idea of which was very common in Central Europe, Rav Hirsch and Hungarian and German Jewry we divide from the Reform. And in Eastern Europe, they didn't have that. They had the secular, the Haskalah, but they're part of our community. We do not make separate communities. And he was totally against separate shuls. Somebody wants to start an own shul. No, we Talmud together in a community shul. He was very, and he was a big Zionist. I mean, it was before Herzl. I mean, he died in 1893, didn't see, but he was a supporter of the early Zionist movement. I don't think it's a coincidence his son became a leader of the Mizrahi movement. Anyways, that's just to know. So both of them discuss. So I think the Netziv's commentary is a little bit more famous, although maybe not. So I'm going to start. We don't really have time to do the whole thing inside, but I do want to show you some of it inside. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan began, so he did a reconstruction of the Shulchan Aruch. This is written he has an introduction to the Shulchan Aruch. So what part of the Shulchan Aruch is it going to be in? When somebody writes an introduction to Shulchan Aruch, right, there are 4 parts of the Shulchan Aruch: Orach Chaim, Yoreh Deah, Choshen Mishpat, Even Ezer. Orach Chaim is our day-to-day life, davening and the holidays. Yoreh Deah is kashrut, mikvah, avelus. Choshen Mishpat is business, commerce, and Even Ezer is family law, marriage, divorce. So if you're going to write an introduction to Shulchan Aruch, what's the part of Shulchan Aruch everybody learns? Somebody? I don't hear anybody. Okay.
Yoreh Deah?
No, it's not when you go for smicha, you learn Yoreh Deah. But right, Orach Chaim, I don't know. I think it's easy. Orach Chaim is
The day-to-day one.
Hilchot Shabbos, Hilchot Pesach, Hilchot Rosh Hashanah. When you start slichas, fast days, Tisha B'av, the 3 weeks. The day-to-day life. So everybody. The Mishnah Berurah is only on Orach Chaim. There's no Mishnah Berurah on the other 3 parts of the Shulchan Aruch. The Mishnah Berurah only wrote on Orach Chaim, day-to-day living. So the Aruch HaShulchan began a Choshen Mishpat. Something to that. Business, that's the mark of a religious Jew. So it's Yom Hadin, we're in the middle of Yemei Hadin, right? So what's the first question? They asked in Shemaim, the Talmud says, Nasata v'natata ben, you're honest in your business dealing. That's a kashrut Shabbos can wait. First get honesty. Tzaddik v'yasharhu, be a yashar. So his introduction is written into Choshen Mishpat. I just find it very interesting. Now, let's go here. So let's find the Aruch HaShulchan. Is it here? Yeah, okay. So here, I'm not going to read this whole thing inside, and they don't really have it in English. So they have maybe a very small part in English that I could find. He's saying, there's so many arguments. We argue about everything, when to do this and this minhag, that minhag. So he says, nah, that shouldn't. He gives a whole history of how the Talmud was developed and why we wrote a Mishnah and why the Talmud was written and why the Shulchan Aruch was written. He gives a whole history, and he says, "Kvar mar ha-philosoph." I don't know which philosopher he's referring to, but it's for sure one of the Greek philosophers. Kila pratim e mispar. There's no number to details. Details are 5 million details. V'chulam divrei Elohim chaim. They're all the word of the living God, and he explains that. Of course, we have argument, but they're all on not important things. We have Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Both these and those are the words of the living God. But he says like this. He says, Ukemofet lezeh, as a sign or an evidence, a miracle, even a sign that's a miracle. Shalotim sa b'chol hashas machloka bikar mitzvah. There's no arguments on the essence of Judaism. It's very interesting what he says. We only argue on the minor details. All the arguments are minor details. Hakol modim shepriyet sadar hu etrog. Everybody agrees that priyet sadar is an etrog. Everybody agrees that ayin tachana, we don't believe in poking out your eye. It's a monetary punishment. And okay, so this one learns from here, this one there. And everybody agrees. Did you ever see Hashmat sheyachloku kama batim yesh b'tefillin sharosh? Does anybody say there are 3 parshiot in the tefillin? 5? Everybody, the whole world agrees 4. Okamo Parshiot and Mezuzah. Does anybody argue that it's the first 2 paragraphs of the Shema that be in the Mezuzah? It's not written anywhere. Okama Brachot. Does anybody argue that how many Brachot? Do we have a Shmon Esrei? Whether we added a 19th Bracha? Or how many Brachot before Shema? Nobody argues on this stuff. We totally agree. Everybody agrees. 2 Parshiot and Mezuzah, 18 in the Brachot. Fine. 2 Brachot before Kriyat Shema. And then he says, this is cute. He says, okay, so one says Ava Rabba and one says Ava Olam. Big deal. So Ozel Mer Hodul Kodem Baruch Shamar. Nusach Sfard says Hod before Baruch Shamar. This one says Baruch Shamar first. Who cares? Ein zeh shinui klal. That doesn't matter. That's no difference. The Chol Echad Yechol Asok. If he no, everybody can do what they want. Who cares if you say Baruch Shamar first or later, right? I mean, some places they do care. But David Achadi, it's the same thing. So you should do whatever your community is doing. You shouldn't be different. Why should you be different? Do whatever they do. Bal nusachu. You know, in Israel, a lot of shuls don't have a nusach. They don't have an Ashkenaz or Sfard. A lot of shuls. Whoever the chazan is, he decides what the nusach is. That's what you have. Beautiful. Here, that wouldn't work in America. Okay. And then he says, do you ever see, did anybody argue how many malachot there are on Shabbat? Everybody agrees there are 39 malachot on Shabbat. Never. Lo haytakas of Israel. And then he says, and he starts talking the calendar. Does anybody argue when the calendar? It's more than 1,800 years. He's born in 1829. He's writing this, I guess, after 1870. It's more than 1,800 years that the Jewish people are scattered mikatzel around the earth. The ain't shum chibur zel l'shanam, and they don't speak the same language. There's in Russia and Poland, Austria, and that's one thing. And then you have the Jews in Paris, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, Tripoli, Libya, Jews all over, and yet it's only been 400 years since the printing press was invented. There was nothing we could write to in it. There was no printing press to write. The Medina Sheva Asia, Africa. And everybody agrees our calendar. Cheshvan Kislev this year is 29 days, 30 days, no arguments. I just think it's a beautiful thing he writes. All the arguments are basically, I don't want to say they're nourishkeit, but there are not important things. The main things about Judaism, we always have to keep that in mind. We agree with more than what we disagree with. We lose sight of that way too often. So he says like this. So we have arguments. He says, okay, everybody has their own opinion. And here's the thing. This is now getting to our parsha. Rabba, the exact opposite. The beauty of our Torah, the holy and pure Torah. The entire Torah, that's our parsha, is called a song. What is a song? It means a symphony. V'tiveret hashir. What makes a song beautiful? When you have the altos and the sopranos and the tenors and the bass, and you got the wind instruments and then all the different things playing. Zoe karhanimut. That's what makes it pleasant and beautiful. When everybody sings the same song, it's boring. It's not nice. Somebody who swims in the sea of the Talmud. Sees the beauty. We see the beautiful thing, how the different voices of Torah come together. So I don't know. I think this is just a powerful idea. What makes the Torah great, what makes the Torah Shira, is their different voices, and everybody has their own voice. And whether you're in Algeria or Tunisia or Morocco and different custom, and who cares that this and that and whatever. So that's why he says Shira is basically a symphony, and in a symphony you have different instruments, and everybody has their part. It goes, and like sometimes the drummist will only hit the drum once, but it's right at that particular spot. Puts the whole thing. I'm not an expert. I don't know anything about opera, but you study. When I went to YU, I don't know if it's still true. When I went to YU, you had to take music. That was a requirement to graduate from college. So they want to teach us. They want to teach us. It's good. I wish I took it more seriously than I did. So one credit course, I wish I did take it more seriously. You study the motifs and the minor and the major and the this and the Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and all the beautiful arrangements of music in B minor and then C major and whatever. And so that's what the Aruch HaShulchan says. That's why the Torah is called the Shira. When the Torah says, write this Shira, well, what do we write? So it's not this song that the Jewish people, you're going to sin, you're going to be punished. The Shira means a beautiful symphony. Everybody has their own part. Everybody's part is different. And that's what makes it beautiful. That's the Aruch HaShulchan.
Rabbi,
Quickly.
Foreman,
I'm sorry?
Rabbi Foreman, often says that the medrash is the harmony to the melody of the Torah.
Okay, so, there you go. That's the whole idea. By the way, listen, we just had Rosh Hashanah. I mean, my wife, it was very, Daven, I told you, I'm not, if I told you, I'm being told other people come, I daven Hashkami, Rosh Hashanah. It's the only time of year. I daven Batikin. So we started at 6:35. We were finished by 10:30. It's a beautiful meeting, about 50 people. Everybody's into it, beautiful singing and everything. And my wife just said the only thing she would like better was to go hear a chazan and a choir. And I'd like to, wonderful. I would also miss, I grew up like that. I grew up with a world famous chazan, Ruchama Danto, I think is on today. She'd come to a lot of our classes. I'm sure some of you know her. Her husband was really a world famous chazan, and that was the chazan my father's shul. My father was a rabbi of a very traditional conservative shul. They don't exist as much anymore. And they had a choir, a soprano, I mean, when people complain davening is 2 hours on Shabbos, I had 3.5 hour davening every Shabbos morning, 3.5 hours, 2 bar mitzvahs every week, and this, and my father spoke before the laning, before the Torah, to the bar mitzvah boy, and a drush, and explained this, and the chazan and the choir. It took over 3 hours, not 3.5, 3.25. Started 8:45, we finished around 12:05. Okay, Beseder. Today, nobody tolerates that, but there is something to be said. Music is beautiful, and in the Beit Hamikdash, and to hear a good chazan, I miss it. I don't know. I don't know that I want to hear a chazan every single week, but there's no just doesn't exist anymore. It's a dying art here and there. So I don't know. But anyways, that's what it means. This Shira. So there is the symphony, it's the melody, and the beautiful, the midrashim. Okay, now let's look at a different approach from his brother-in-law, son-in-law, the Netziv. And then Netziv interprets the word Shira in a literary way, not in a musical way. Then Netziv interprets, why does this keep moving here? To where are we going here? Here we go. This is his introduction to the Torah. The Netziv's introduction to the Torah. Ha'emek Davar. The Netziv was I like all great people. They're all fascinating, and they all think differently. They're not cookie carbons of each other. The Netziv was the Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin. He gave a Parsha Shir every week. What Rosh Yeshiva do you know gives a Parsha Shir? Like it's Pasnish. They got to give on Rambam and Rav Chaim and this. So he gave every day. Apparently after he gave a shir on the Parsha. And they wrote it up in this book, Emek Davar. That's his commentary. So he has his introduction, Kidmat HaEmek. Before the depths, HaEmek Davar. The digging into the depths of the Torah. Okay, so he quotes like this. Quotes the Gemara, says, Kitvu lachem et hashira, write this song, Shu kol Torah, sell Torah. So, how do they know that? Okay, so he says like this. Imken yesh ba teva v'skula shira. It has the attributes of a song, of a poem. Shu dibor b'lashon melitza v'yadua. So now he said, the Netziv, to the best of my knowledge, I know he didn't go to university. And to the best of my knowledge, he didn't speak a fluent Russian. He lived in Russia, but he didn't speak Russian well. The Yadua Lachom Evin Talmud, the Mushuna Hamalitza Mishur Prazi B'Shnei Inyanim B'Tevu Skula. Anybody who knows anything about language knows that prose and poetry are two different forms of expressing yourself. The Bashir in a poem, Ein Inyan Muvar Yafeh, doesn't explain itself well. You can't really understand what's going on just by reading the poem. B'Sibur Prazi prose, you can write whatever you want. But Tzarich Lasod Harot Minatzad, you got to put notes on the side. You got to have somebody explain. You got to read between the lines. That's what Harot Minatzad means. The main part of a poem is between the lines. V'zeh Acharuz Kevan Lezeh HaSipur, that this is interprets this. This line refers to this, and this means that. V'lo Mikra Trush. This is not some like a second level interpret, like a drasha. No. This is the meaning. It's not like an extra level. The rabbis are making a homiletical interpretation. No. Alakachu teva ashir. This is the nature. That's what it means to be a poem. Afilu shal hatyot, even of the simple person, right? Muskal od demishu betov inyan. And those who are more intelligent, he understands poetry well. He'll know in Shevi what caused the author to write it like this. Matoklo or lashon shel shir. He find it's sweet, the beautiful language of poetry. But every letter and everything, why Shakespeare and the way he wrote her. I don't know. Think of other, Robert Frost. I don't know. Think of the great poets, the way they write. I mean, Miliish. Milton, I don't know, he wasn't really a poet. She'ein lo yediyah mikvenet zeh, v'rak bal v'itamin hamitzah Torah finyan. Okay, mizeh lul hu yishoret b'ydiot. Okay, fine. We don't have time to everything. Kachu teva shel kol Torah. This is the nature of the entire Torah. The Torah Torah does a really bad job of explaining what it means. The Torah never explains itself. We have to make notes. We have to read between the lines. Lo nikra drush, that's just plain meaning. Alakachu pshat, that's the simple meaning of Torah. And you know what? You can't do it unless you study poetry, right? I always said, like when I'm in grade 8 and people are boring, don't go and talk me a Chinese poetry. The teacher, English teachers, all these crazy things. Yeah, is that what the poet really meant, right? Do you really think Shakespeare meant that? Come on, and we don't care about it, right? But yeah, but when you appreciate it, you have to study it really hard to begin to appreciate it, and then you begin to love it. You see how beautiful it is. That's so true in Torah. Just read it. It's boring. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't speak to me, right? But you have to know how to read it. It's a poem. So it's like this, and he says, you got to put weird language because he's a ballad, so it's got to be 14 lines. So you got to fit it into 14 lines. So you got to play around with words. Or he wants to have his initial of the name. The first letter of every stanza should be the initial of his name, like in the Slichos now. You see all the time. Beautiful. So you got to do the language a little bit weird to get these other ideas. So that's exactly what they do in the Torah. He wants to make the beginning of every paragraph to hint to something else. The davar zeh mamash. This is all over the Torah. All over Torah. Torah changes its language, writes unclear ways because it's hinting to other things. So okay, says. Also, there are many things in poet that's not even there. Then there's stuff really between the lines. There's allusions to it. You got to figure out that are not written there. That comes because the language is a little weird. So it's hinting to all kinds of things that they don't really talk about. And this is true not just in the Torah, in all of our holy language. That's how people learn in the Rambam, an extra letter in the Rambam, etc. Then what else does he say? Let's see if there's anything. Okay. Okay, he's talking about all the hidden stuff, all the beauty of the Torah.
And that's why every year we go over the parshas over and over.
Yeah, because there's always new thing. You have to study poetry. Here's a slight English translation, right? The qualities of poetry, which is speech, is flowery language. The flowery language differs from prose narrative in two features, right? Not that clearly, it's uniquely alluded to single things. So these, I don't know, I find these are two beautiful ideas that why the Torah is called itself a shira. So the Aruch HaShulchan, the word shira sounds more like the Aruch HaShulchan, sounds like a song, a symphony. It's a symphony in a poem. And that explains why and we all know, the more you study a poem, the more you begin to understand it. What he doesn't explain in its but to me, whenever I teach this, I always say, another feature of poetry, it stands the test of time. A great poem. I mean, we study stuff from hundreds and thousands of years. We study Shakespeare still. I mean, I hope people still study Shakespeare. Because we think there's something valuable when we study Macbeth and Hamlet. And Rav Lichtenstein got a degree in English literature for a good reason. And as he said, it enhanced his appreciation of Tanakh. It stands the test of time, but also what you also find in a poem is that every generation finds new meaning and new interpretations. And you get into the whole question of author intent. Doesn't matter what the author intended to, and the general theory today in literature, it doesn't. That's, I'm sure many of you have heard me or other people say, the famous story, they went to Rav Soloveitchik, gives this whole fantastic interpretation in the Rambam. We always do a search to make sure we'd always talk on the Rambam. And somebody went over and said, do you really think the Rambam meant all those things that you put in the Rambam? And Rav Soloveitchik says, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant if the Rambam meant it or not. That we can read it into the Rambam. That's the greatness of the Rambam. It doesn't matter. What do you think all the interpretations of Shakespeare is what Shakespeare meant? Of course not. It doesn't matter. That's what makes it a great point. So Kal V'chomer, how much more so when God writes the book? But the truth of the matter, it doesn't matter what God thinks either. And that's last week's Parsha. When the Tzavim and Vayelech are together, so we read last week Parsha, Ki mitzvah zot asher anochi mitzavcha, lo rechoka, it's not far from you, lo b'shamayim hi, it's not in heaven. So that means the pshat, the simple meaning, it's not in heaven, like it's not so hard, or it's not so hard. And of course the rabbis say that it's not in heaven. God, you stay out of this argument. Rabbi Yeshua Lo b'shamayim, the Torah is not in heaven. God, we don't really care what you have to say about it. Once you gave us it, that's what the Gemara says. It's really powerful. Once God gives us the Torah, God has no say in its development. The Torah is meant for human beings, and only humans can interpret it. We interpret it differently than God intended. That's beautiful, and that's why that story continues. I mentioned many times, but you have to repeat things, of course. The Talmud says, that the story, and Rabbi Lezer is bringing proofs from heaven. For the water should flow backwards, the tree should move, the wall should cave in, and a heavenly voice should come on, and all those things happen. A heavenly voice comes on and says, Rabbi Lezer is right. And Rabbi Shua says, I don't care. Torah lo b'shamayim. The Torah is not in heaven. We don't listen to heavenly voices. We don't listen to prophets, and the prophet's not allowed to issue halakhic rulings. Only a sage, so only a Torah scholar. Cheskel Yishev, they don't issue halakhic rulings. So the Gemara says what happened is the next day, Rav Nassan was walking and he made Eliyahu Hanavi, and whatever that means. Kind of cool. And he asked Eliyahu, what was God doing when this story was happening? And Eliyahu says, God, he was smiling. Nitzchuni banai nitzchuni. My children have defeated me. My children have defeated me. And the other interpretation, what netzach means. Eternity. My children may be only by interpreting the Torah and playing with it and turning it up. Hafochba. Turn it inside and outside, and new interpretations, and new analysis, and new application. We're not living in the shtetl anymore. We have a state of Israel. Things are different, and therefore the Torah has to be understood in a different way. And within the system has to be understood in a different way. That's how you make Torah eternal. That's Nitzavim Vayelech. That's how I started. You have to know when to stand still. This is our tradition for 3,000 years. We have a Masorah, very true. But we also, Vayelech, we got to move and we got to change things. It's different. We're living in different time. And the key to successful Judaism is finding the right balance. And that's what basically everybody, that's Reform, Orthodoxy, Haredi, everybody, conservative, everybody's arguing for 200 years. Where do you find that balance? The Reform said we should change a lot. The ultra-Orthodox, Haredi, whatever, say we shouldn't change anything. And they say, well, when you get down to it, that's really what they're arguing about. How much right do we have? The Torah lo b'shamayim, how much right, what's the power of individual? I remember of individual rabbis, the conservative movement say rabbis have a lot of power. They can change the laws in the Talmud. Okay, and Orthodox Judaism says no, we can't change the laws in Talmud. But it's not like at least the classical conservative Judaism. Maybe today is very different. But anyways, this is the question. Okay, I didn't know when the shir is supposed to end because we started late, so I don't know if we're supposed to end late or still end at 9:30. So well, anyways, I went later on time. But okay, we'll just wrap off. Just a quick review. We discussed Vayelech. Just interesting how Parshat name, how the Jewish people don't name Parshiyot after our heroes, not after Moshe, not after Yaakov, not after, we named them after, even though Yitro is a good guy, we named them for non-Jews or we named them for negative people, Bala, Korach, etc. But there's no Parsha name for Moshe because names aren't important. Rav Soloveitchik has that, by the way, in the Machzor in Yom Kippur. How many members of the Anshe Knesset Gdola can you name? Like 3, like Ezra, maybe Mordechai. Ezra, Mordechai, you can't name anybody else. Zerubbabel, I don't know. We don't know. Rav is one thing. That's why Jews never wrote history books. Today it's very different. Today people do write history books about Gedolim, but that was never the style of rabbis because Masehem, whatever the expression is, their actions, that's their history. We don't care about we don't care about that stuff because we want to be nameless. Be humble, be Moshe Rabbeinu. He's willing to have his name erased from the book. It doesn't matter who. It matters that you teach. That's it's very hard for us because we love to have our name, right? That's what modern people, we love to have our name. People should remember us. So he says, classic Judaism. This is hard. I don't know. I don't know if everybody has to, I don't know if this is like Torah Sinai, but this is what Rav Soloveitchik writes in the Machzor, that we Jews, we want to be anonymous. Great Jews are always anonymous behind the scenes. We know the Lamed Vav Tzadikim, whatever. So we don't name.
Great Jews are remembered by their Sfarim that they wrote.
Yeah, by their Sfarim, right? But even their Sfarim, half of them don't have their names.
Don't have their names, right? They're called after, like the Chafetz Chaim.
The Chafetz Chaim didn't even put his name to the book. He didn't even want to put his name to the book. He only he put his name, I think to the Mishnah Brura. I'm not sure. I forget now. Maybe somebody put his name to. Yeah, they didn't put their names to their book. Okay, whatever. Right. So that's just the naming of the parsha. Okay. Then we spoke about how the 612th mitzvah is Hakel, but Hakel follows on the transfer of leadership to Yoshua, for Moshe to Yeshua, which was a scary time for Moshe, for Yeshua, for the Jewish people. And the most important thing of a leader is to unite the people, especially a new leader, especially going into a new circumstances. Yeah, you didn't vote for me, but it doesn't matter. So the first thing we're told after Yeshua becomes the leader, Latseif Lavo, that started in Parshat Pinchas when Moshe asked God, find a new leader who's going to lead Latseif Lavo. There are other qualifications there. We didn't talk about the leadership. And here he is. Moshe says, I can't be Latseif Lavo anymore. Here's Yeshua. But now we're going to gather all the people all together, and we're going to conquer the land and go in, and we have to be a united people. And that's why Hakel is on Sukkot and on Shemitah. That's the holidays we talk about the unity of the people. That's all that we care about the poor. They can come eat our field. We invite people on Sukkot, Masrot. That's all. It's all connected, Hakel. And we need the children have to experience it. The kids, they got to be like, you got to breathe it in their mother's milk, like even before they're conscious of what they're doing. Got to bring them. It was only 7 years because then it loses its impact. Now, what I didn't mention, Hakel is the experience of Torah. It's the national Torah. We come together. It's not learning Torah. The king would read bits and pieces of Torah, but it's not about learning Torah. It's about the experience of Torah. The writing down of a Sefer Torah is about personal learning Torah. So, and then we discussed, the rabbis took this idea that God said to Moshe, it's going to be really bad when you die. And then they said, no, this is the beauty of the Torah. It's not really referring to that negative stuff. The whole Torah's Shira said it's a symphony. Everybody plays their own part. Some have a major part, some have a minor part. He didn't say the beauty of orchestra is that it's different voices and different instruments. That's the beauty of Torah. And then Netziv says the beauty of Torah is its multiple interpretations. It's you have to study it to really understand it. But it's the beauty. It's like poetry. Everything's between the lines. It stands the test of time. Everything. What I didn't say, what I would say, and we'll have to leave that really for another time, but I just will mention the Rosh famously, the Rosh quotes in the Rosh Rabbeinu Asher, the father of the Torah, one of the great medieval greats, and quoted in the Shulchan Aruch, that this mitzvah the mitzvah today has changed. Vayelech. Why did the mitzvah change? Because it says in the Torah, take this Shira and teach it to the Jewish people. So the Rosh says, before we had a Torah Shebaal Peh, the only book we had was a Sefer Torah. You wrote a Sefer Torah, and that's how you taught your children. Today, you keep the Sefer Torah in the Aron Kodesh. You don't fulfill any mitzvah when you write the Sefer. You have to buy Art Scroll or Koran or whatever you want to buy, Sonsino, You have to buy books. That's what he said. You fulfill it by Mishnah. He wrote Mishnah and Talmud. So today you write Art Scroll. Okay, it's whatever. So it's to have books, and there's a whole discussion. How can you do that? How can you change how can a law in the Torah no longer become operative anymore? But that's how there's some want to argue on the Rosh, but the Shulchan Aruch accepts to be the Rosh, which is a simple reading, that the whole purpose of the mitzvah is to teach Torah. So there is no mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah anymore. And that's what I say today. We have plenty of Sefer Torah. They come out once a year on Simchas Torah. I don't want to get any of it. It's very beautiful. People want to honor their parents, write Sefer Torah. But I personally, if I may, I hope nobody throws stones on me. I think it's a much greater honor. Give the money to Jewish education. That's the purpose of writing a Sefer Torah. Our schools are struggling. Tuition is way too expensive, and we can't attract great people it's hard to attract great people into teaching because we can't pay the salaries to compete with whatever. And so if we took 5,000 Sifrei Torah, if in every city took 100 Sifrei Torah, and so for $50,000 each, about $5 million, and put that into Jewish education, would be further ahead. That's my humble opinion that I'll end with. Okay, any questions, comments? Just please, of course, I have my regular shir tomorrow at 9:30. I got the whole year. I waited to Parshat Vayelech to give a Parsha shir this year. I don't think last year, I don't think I gave one at all. I like other people to give it. But I figure after a fast day, I'm going to ask somebody to give, once a year, so I'll give the Parsha. But so I have my regular shir on the Machzor tomorrow, 9:35 a.m. in the morning. And of course, on Sunday, we have our Yom Iyun that I hope everybody's registered for. 6 wonderful speakers, Malka Simkowitz, Josh Joseph, Tara Kelman. Who's next? I was after my daughter. Now I'm forgetting. I should have looked it up. Now I'm embarrassing myself. I forget who that was. Tzvi Hershkowitz? No, Lori Novak spoke on Rosh Hashanah. I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, Aaron Adler. Aaron Adler, whose brother, of course, just passed away. Yossi Adler, great leader in Teaneck. I see Molly's from Teaneck. I know who also lives in Teaneck here. Debbie, right? So Aaron Adler, his brother, who's been living in Israel for many years, is also speaking. He wrote there. I mean, I was in contact with him. I was with him. He, so he'll also be speaking on Sunday. Anyways, that's Sunday 9:15. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to take them. It has been in Moshe's shadow. Yes.
Say something. I love what you said about drush being an interpretation of poetry. This corresponds to what Tali Adler pointed out of Hadar this morning, that Shivim Lashonot, the Torah was given in Shivim Lashonot, not Shivim Safot, but Shivim Lashonot are interpretations, not languages.
You say, how does Lashon mean an interpretation?
Well, it has to mean that because
I understand what you're saying. It's not saying 70 languages.
It doesn't
right,
make
which is the way we normally understand. Torah was written in 70 languages.
It doesn't make sense that people coming out of Egypt needed to have the Torah in 70 languages. They only spoke one language, Egyptian. It was not, or maybe two. They definitely didn't need 70 languages, but they did need 70 interpretations. And that's
right, okay, that's very good. Listen, it's very true. People need different interpretations, otherwise they get turned off from Torah. We need different ways to present Torah, otherwise, this type of Torah doesn't speak to people. So, right, when you that's I remember that's the beauty of Torah. I remember Mark Angel, when he spoke for us years ago, like live in Toronto, said that in Stom, what the rabbis interpret Stom, everybody's bed had to be the exact same size. So what's the Medrash driving at? Does everybody think alike, be alike? There was one way to do things. When everybody's to sleep in the same bed, so to speak, everybody got to be exactly the same. No, that's Stom. That's Stom. And it turns people off of, if there's only one way to do things, if the only way to be an observant Jew is X or Y, we're finished. You need many different approaches. And that's hard. We can't be an Am Sheyoraf. We have to be able to move our neck and to see other views. And Elu Velu Divrei Limchaim. Of course, what are the limits? I don't know. I have a very wide interpretive tent. And even if people are doing things that I think are incorrect, I'm happy to say they mean well, and even if I think they're totally wrong, and then they violate halakha and stuff. But if they're trying to worship God, who am I to judge? They should do, we should do whatever. I can try to say that I think what I do show and demonstrate. But it's beautiful. People, I think it's really beautiful when quote unquote non-observant Jews do ways to express their religiosity, even if they're not done in halachic ways. What I want them at the beach.
B'chol dor vador need.
Sorry?
B'chol dor vador
Yeah.
need different lashon.
Yeah. B'chol dor. Yeah, right. The Torah is the fiap shatim amet kashim b'chol yom. Every day they're doing interpretations, right? That's why a shofet asher yeh. I've quoted the judge in that time. I quoted many times the commentary, the Drisha in the first siman of Choshen Mishpat, like where the Aruch HaShulchan's introduction is to, where it writes the posek. It says, I'll end with this. It says that whoever's done a judge who's done din emet l'amito becomes a partner with God. If you judge a din emet, a true judgment, l'amito, it's like truth to truth. He does a judgment of truth to truth. Din emet la'amito. You've heard that expression. He becomes part of the God. So he says, what does emet la'amito mean? What does it mean truth to truth? Either it's true or it's not true. What do you mean truth to truth? So he says, there's something that's true, but it's wrong. He says, a posek, a dayan, has to judge lefi hamakom or lefi hasman. It sounds like a reformist. Okay, who is? Maybe. Lefi hamakom or lefi hasman. There's the objective truth of Torah. I always say Torah is an art and Torah is a science. So there's scientific rules, there's technical rules, but then there's the art, what to apply, how to apply it. So that's what he writes. And it's the first line, it's Hilchat Dayan. Choshen Mishpat begins with Dayan. How do you appoint? What are the qualifications to be a Dayan? So he says he has to dan emet la'amito. He has to know the fi hamakom lefi hasman. I'll just think. I remember hearing from my uncle years ago. I'm not an agudist. Moshe Scherer, who built up the Aguda, he used to instruct rabbis. You have to read the New York Times every day. Yeah, you want to be a rabbi, you have to read the New York Times every day. Okay, I don't want to get into politics, and people don't like the New York, whatever. Yeah, it's okay. It's a different time. But by the way, I do read the New York Times every day. I do. I have pay a dollar a week to get a subscription here in Canada. I read it online. It's important to read. I do think it's important to read the New York Times. I read the Globe and Mail, the Jerusalem Post. Once in a blue moon, once every 6 months, I'll take a look at Al Jazeera. Once in a blue moon, I'll take a look at Aretz. I'll take a look at World Yeshiva News sometimes. I don't know what I get there, but like they don't have real.
And every time you learn these different points of view, it adds to a
It's good. It's
thinking,
good to
right?
see. It's good to see good quality stuff. Even don't agree with it, and sometimes be open to new perspectives. Okay, okay. All right. Any other comments before I stop my rambling? Yes.
In the beginning of your talk, you were talking about the stiff-necked and whether it's good or bad.
Right.
And I like to think of it as good. The Jewish people would not exist if we were not stiff-necked.
Okay, so I agree. It's like everything in life. You have to know where to apply it. Right. It's the same thing I've been saying. Oh, you have to know Nitzavim Vayelech. You have to know sometimes a stick neck is a good idea. I agree with you. There is a place for stubbornness and for being. You are correct. The question is to know when. When it's all the time, but it's read in the Torah. It's always used in a negative context. I think it's always used in negative context. I have to look more carefully. Unless you look at maybe some of those verses, you can interpret it both ways. But I agree with you. I'm sure it can mean both. But Rabbi Perez was talking about it in sort of in its negative sense of not willing to see any other view. Sometimes it's a positive, but we can make a positive. Just like two negatives can become a positive. I don't know if that's true in math. Two positives don't become a negative, but conceptually, two positives can become a negative.
Unfortunately, this is
pagan. I mean, I'm stiff-necked when it comes to paganism.
Yeah, our stiff neck to maintaining our way of life. When it comes to, we're not going to convert to Christianity. We're stiff necked people. Good, right? But when we're not willing to hear somebody else's view, when whatever. I got an email today from somebody who wanted to know whatever. Getting into all the details, basically saying that they started cancel culture now in Israel. That somebody knows who signed on to Rabbi Blau's letter, with criticizing the Israeli government, was supposed to speak at a shul in Ranana, and they canceled him because they signed the letter. So he was writing to me how terrible this is and whatever, and I agree with him. And without commenting on Rabbi Blau's letter,
that's peer pressure to conform.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, we should hear good things. God should hear our prayers for good. We should know how to get along. Hakel, Shemitah, Sukkot. We should know how to get along. We should see the beauty of Torah, the Shira of Torah, to study the poetry, but to sing the music of Torah, to sing the music, everybody in their own light. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Amen.
Tomorrow, Sunday, next week, Shabbat Shalom. Yeah. One more question somebody wants to ask.
It's a comment. The thing about Blau, the reason why it's so polarizing is not that he wrote the letter, but it was public.
Whatever. Okay, and that's not for now. Different opinions.
Privately,
some people
he wrote 1,000 cosigners, not 120.
He wrote why he think it was important to publicize it. He would interview in Jerusalem Post or Times of Israel. I forget where. He had a long interview, and he read it's important. And he said it's important. You can agree or disagree, but I just want to explain what he said. He said that it's important for Jews to see that they're Orthodox Jews who are willing to be critical of Israel, because Israel has become a pariah state in many parts of the world. Young Jews are totally turned off of Israel. It's the opposite of the Six-Day War, and they're running away from Israel because they see Israel, whether it's right or wrong, that's not my question. That's the reality. As an extremist state, and we want to show there are other views out there who are Torah-observant Jews who feel that Israel should go in a different path. That's all. You can agree or disagree.
It's not a reality. The strongest supporters now of Israel are young Jews. I've never seen more.
That may be true. That's not a contradiction.
Not the ones in the US
that's not a contradiction.
Colleges.
I don't want to get into politics here, but I'm just trying to explain that's the right. Yes, they're young Jews who are very supportive, and they're young Jews who are turned off. There's not a contradiction.
There are more.
The
strongest supporters now of Israel are young Jews.
Okay. I'll say something interesting. They gave out a thing, UJ, they had it in shul. You know, the federation there is very strong. And thank God Orthodox Jews are involved in UJ much more here than they are in New York, I would say. But so they wrote 5,000 Israeli Jews have moved to Toronto since October 7th. And they read, well, the help they're giving them. And they say, it's not we don't, how many, you already talk about, all the Jews making Aliyah to Israel. Yeah. How many Jews from Israel and from Toronto made Aliyah since October? I don't know. But I can tell you that typically 200 to 400 Jews a year from Canada make Aliyah. 3,000 Jews from America make Aliyah. We're about 300 Jews a year make Aliyah. So let's say 500 Jews made Aliyah from Canada since October 7th. 5,000 Israelis have moved here. That tells you something.
That surprises you.
That's not surprising me, but you can't look at, all the support Israelis love Israel. No, people are running away from Israel. Israelis are running away from Israel. I'm not again comments, right or wrong. Those are the facts. So, you know, it's young people may be supporting Israel, but plenty of young people are turned off of Israel. Talk to young people, see what they say about Israel.
I do talk.
Okay, that's great. If you can turn them on to Israel, it's wonderful. I have to go listen. I have to listen to Angela
full of fire.
You hear about it?
The young are full of fire about Israel.
Oh, great. I actually want to go hear Angela Puchtal's speech. You know, Angela Puchtal is the rabbi of the Central Synagogue, the largest Reform shul in New York. She's amazing. I mean, she's not halachically Jewish, but okay, what can you do? But she's an amazing Jewish leader. So her speech is written up in the Jerusalem Post today because she's been a rabbi for 20 years. And it's very hard for her to talk about Israel. It's hardest to find Israel. She's a big supporter of Israel, but she's also a big critic of Israel at the same time. And it's not a contradiction. Hamas is terrible and evil, and we have to support Israel unconditionally. At the same time, we can't starve Palestinians, and she's willing to say both. And, you know, and that can get you in certain parts of the Orthodox community, that can get you canceled. But I'm glad it's way after the shir. None of this has anything to do with the shir. But it is. It's a very complicated situation. And I commend Rabbi Blau for doing what he did. And I commend him. I think it's wonderful.
He's completely allowed.
That's all. Okay.
So that action, he should expect a reaction.
Okay. That's fine. Okay.
Rabbi Jay, can I say something?
Yes.
Totally different way.
I have to finish preparing my shir for tomorrow, but okay.
Wait. This is for you. Okay. So, in keeping with looking at the entire Torah as a giant poem, you can see the symmetry here. Our story really starts with Lech Lecha, and it's ending here with Vayelech.
Very nice. Very nice. I didn't think of that. That's so beautiful and simple. I never thought of it. Lech Lecha. Start Lech Lecha and now Vayelech. Right. To go and he went. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Okay, everybody. On that note, everybody have a Laila Tov, go to bed. And I'm staying up for a while, but okay, all right, enjoy. Thank you for coming.
Laila Tov.
You look to Laila Tov. Bye-bye.